Hi, everyone. We're going to give people just another 2 minutes to join, so we'll get started at 9:01 Central Time. So bear with us for another 2 minutes here. Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Right-Click Tools Enterprise webinar. My name is Chris Muster. I'm the CTO here at Recast Software, and today I'm joined by Marty Miller. Marty is a customer success manager here at Recast, and he helps all of our enterprise customers solve any technical challenges they might have with the product. Marty's going to be keeping an eye on the Q&A today. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar, you can use the Q&A button inside of Zoom, and he'll try to get those answered. If you're watching this on the YouTube live stream, you can also use the YouTube chat to ask your questions, and we'll try to get those answered as well. Before we dive in today, I just want to mention we have a $100 gift card that we're going to raffle off at the end of the webinar. So stick around to the end and to have your name entered in the drawing, and we'll announce that here on the webinar today. If you've attended some of our past webinars, you might have heard us talk about, well, we're not covering everything that's available inside of the right-click tools. We're only handling the difference between the last version and the current version. This webinar is trying to cover some of those other missing features that we might not have talked about in the release webinars. And when people think about right-click tools, when we talk to prospects about right-click tools enterprise, we often find that they think about the right-click tools in terms of our productivity tools, our client actions, our client tools, and our console tools. And our analytics data suggests the same, that people find a lot of value inside of these right-click tools, the client actions, the console tools, client tools. But when we at Recast think about the right-click tools, the productivity tools are a small subset of what's available inside of the rest of the enterprise suite. We typically think of our productivity tools in terms of community tools, but there are some extra enhancements you get when you upgrade to enterprise in the remote software center and client info and system information tools as well. But we also think about things in terms of actionable dashboards, where we try to take our experience as sysadmins and find all of the areas where we've found challenges in the past at organizations we might have worked at, and try to present information in a way that makes it easy to identify certain areas where the environment might need some help in getting up to compliance. So whether it's getting your devices managed under config manager, right, finding all the devices in your organization that might not be under management, or bringing the devices that are under management up to your security and compliance standards with regards to BitLocker or LAPS or software updates and that kind of thing. We also think about it in terms of our automation platform in Builder and Runner. So if you have some organization-specific issues in your environment, that's where Builder and Runner can help by enabling you to use all of the back-end actions that we use as developers in the right-click tools to kind of customize your own solution and deliver it to some of your service desk staff, for example, to solve a problem. So if there's some issue that your service desk is seeing over and over and over again, and they keep escalating tickets to you as a config man admin, you can provide an easy button for them to solve it themselves on a first call resolution type of thing. We have tools that help with kiosks, so single purpose devices, where these are devices that are typically lower value in terms of the percentage of your organization that are kiosks, but they are higher impact as far as the amount of customizability that you have to manage there. And so we try to provide a bunch of tools that lower the bar to managing these kiosks, whether it's enabling them to automatically log in or replace the entire Windows desktop experience with a single app so that the user is presented with exactly the type of experience that you want them to see. And this set of tools allows you to easily switch back and forth between the single purpose device and the fully blown Windows desktop environment. So if your computer lab one day has to be prepared for a specific training or test, you can roll it into a kiosk manager profile and then quickly roll it back the next day to be more of a generic computer lab. And finally, we think about our enterprise, our tools in terms of how ready they are for the enterprise. And this yellow tier kind of belongs in its own tier below all the other ones, because it's all about taking all of the right-click tools, all of the functionality inside of right-click tools community and enterprise, and making it more customizable to fit your environment, right? Whether that's enabling custom permissions so that you can control which right-click tools are used by different IT administrators in your organization, to auditing the actions that those right-click tools users are running in your organization. If it also enables things like untrusted domain support. So if you're running your actionable dashboards against, trying to find compliance of your lapse passwords without the recast management server and recast proxy, that typically works in a single domain environment. But with this enterprise ready layer, you can also get information about all the domains that are under your management, regardless of the trust relationships between them. So there's a lot of power available inside of Recast Management Server. We're not going to go in depth on anything in that enterprise ready tier today, but we are in talks about having a future webinar where we go deep into all of the things that Recast Management Server, Recast Proxy, and Recast Agent can give you. If you're interested in that, please let us know. I think we'll be sending out a survey after the webinar to ask what, to get feedback on what the next webinar should be about. As far as what we are covering today, we're going to be focused on everything else in this chart. We're going to be focused on the dashboards. We'll be focused on the kiosk manager and unified right filter manager portions of the tools, as well as our builder and runner automation platform. And then we'll leave some time at the end for an extended Q&A session. So if there's any questions that we didn't get to throughout the webinar, we'll try to answer those then. All right, so now we're going to jump into the demo portion of the webinar. And we're going to start in the dashboard section here under Assets Compliance. And we're going to start with the Active Directory Cleanup tool. And this is probably a little bit misnamed because it's about more than just cleaning up Active Directory, but making sure that all of the systems that are in your environment are managed by your systems management platform. And when I hit scan here, we're going to see a pie chart pop up in the middle. And there's kind of three sections to this pie chart. And we're creating a diff between what's in Config Manager and what's in Active Directory. And the areas that we're looking at are controlled by either this OU or this collection field up at the top here. And here I'm scanning all of Active Directory and all of Config Man. And we can see that in the red we have a bunch of systems that are present in Active Directory but not present in Config Man. In the yellow we have systems that are present in Config Man but not Active Directory, and then in the blue we have both. And this presents us with a couple of different challenges, right? If we have devices that are in Config Man but not in Active Directory, we might ask, well, why aren't these devices in Active Directory? Why aren't we getting them in AD so that we can have a single sign-on solution, so that we can have our group policies and our normal GPOs applied to those systems? If probably more common in most environments is having devices that are in AD but not in Config Man. And these are devices where maybe they're just really old and Config Man has cleaned them up, but we don't have a solid process for cleaning up our Active Directory. For those devices, maybe we want to sort by AD last word pass set date and go ahead and delete them from Active Directory to get them cleaned up. Or if we don't have permission to clean up Active Directory, maybe we want to export a CSV of the data and send it off to our Active Directory team to have them help us out with with cleaning up this information. And this is really about, for devices that are maybe newer, that are actively setting their password, we probably want to relitigate those devices and ask ourselves, well, why aren't they getting into config ban? Is there a reason that we've prevented these devices from getting into config ban? Maybe they don't trust the config ban team or what have you. But we just want to make sure that there's a valid reason, a business reason, for not having these devices under management, because they do become a security risk in your organization, because they're not getting your normal applications, your updates, and all those things. All right, moving on to our lapse dashboards. The lapse dashboard is all about looking at your lapse compliance state. And by lapse compliance state, I mean how many devices actually have a lapse password in Active Directory, and how many devices have the lapse client installed. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the lapse stands for Local Administrator Password Solution. It's a free tool by Microsoft that enables you to randomize the local admin password on your devices and save them on the device object in Active Directory. And so this tool is all about compliance with those policies. Over here on the left, we have an Active Directory view of our compliance, where we look at devices both without a lapse password and with a lapse password. And there's some interesting data in both of these. To start with, the devices without a lapse password, if I search or sort by the client install state, I see a bunch of devices with an unknown client install state, and that's data coming from Config Manager. So these are all devices that I probably don't have the lapse client installed on, and I'm missing a password on. So the password's probably missing because the lapse client is there, right? That makes sense. So we might run the Remote Software Center against these devices and just get the lapse client installed there. Or if they're not in a proper collection where I have an automated deployment, maybe I want to run the add devices to collection tool to make sure that they get the lapse password or the lapse client deployment bundle that I've created. Some other interesting information here at the bottom, we see a bunch of devices that have the 64-bit lapse client, but no lapse password. So these are devices where we probably need to check the permissions in Active Directory to make sure that these devices are able to write their own lapse password to the device object. And if I, as a config-man admin, don't have permission to do that in Active Directory, I can, again, export the CSV and send it over to the AD team and say, hey, look, these devices just aren't getting the lapse password, and I think it's because of the permissions issues in lapse or in Active Directory for those devices. On the right side, we get a similar view, or we get kind of a pivot of that same view, where we're looking in ConfigMan for the lapse client install state, and as we click through the chart, we can see devices in the various states, right? So I can see the unknown devices. These are devices where I probably want to push out the lapse client to those devices, right? Because they're missing that client. They're never going to get the lapse password in there. Some interesting things over here. I do see a couple of devices that have a password in Active Directory, but no lapse client installed. And you can see the expirations are all kind of in the past. So these are devices that once had a lapse client installed, but no longer do. So we probably want to remediate those. And finally, again, you can view the computers with the lapse client installed, and then again, by that password expiration column, we can see devices that we might want to take action on, right? So just to show what I was talking about with the Remote Software Center, I didn't actually show that. The Remote Software Center is an incredibly useful tool for these types of things, because it lets you look at the Software Center as if I was opening up the local Software Center on my own device and viewing the apps that are available there. And here I can see I've got the lapse password solution there, and if this was not installed on this device, I could check it and hit install here. And the cool thing about this is it doesn't actually have to be deployed to the device to get that installed. I can actually go and view applications that are deployed to my user account and install the application that way. So it's an incredibly powerful tool for remediating these types of issues, assuming that you've already packaged the lapse password client in your environment. The next tool we're going to talk about is the BitLocker compliance tool, and this is the same idea as the Labs tool, where we're scanning for compliance, but this time related to BitLocker keys and in compliance with your MBAM or CM BitLocker management policies. And the charts here are a little bit more complicated because we have a couple of more areas that we're scanning. So on the left here, we get kind of an overall view of where keys are stored in our environment. And here we're scanning both Active Directory, we're scanning MBAM, and we're scanning CM BitLocker management. And as I click through here, we can see a number of different combinations. We have combinations for all three permutations that are, or all of the permutations that are available for those three compliance options. Compliant with BitLocker, or compliant with MBAM, compliant with CM, non-compliant with BitLocker. And probably the most interesting thing here is this computers without stored keys. In particular, if I sort by this encryption method column, if I see any devices that don't have stored keys that are encrypted, I probably want to get those backed up right away, because if the BitLocker screen triggers on those devices, I'm not going to be able to get my users access to the files in their environment, or I can't guarantee access to that. So anything in here without stored keys that is in a state of not encrypted, I want to make sure to fix that. And anything in here that is not encrypted, I probably want to fix that too, right? If these devices aren't encrypted, that probably goes against my BitLocker policies. And we have a tool called the BitLocker status tool that can help you with that. So if I go under security tools and launch BitLocker status, I can get a targeted view of the BitLocker state of that particular machine. So I can see all the drives that are on it, whether or not it's encrypted, what percentage encrypted it is, any key protectors it has, and if not only that, I can also remediate it from here. So I can add TPM key protectors and PIN key protectors if I want, and then I can go ahead and encrypt the volume. So I can make sure that it's actually compliant with my policies, assuming I have an information security policy that says all devices must be encrypted. This middle pie chart shows a different pivot of the same data, but this time it's by what your MBAM server thinks of as compliant in your environment. So I can click on compliant or unknown. Devices that are compliant I might not worry too much about, but the unknown compliance, these are probably devices that maybe I don't have an MBAM client installed on these devices, or if they do have an MBAM client, maybe there's some issue with the policies that I've set. I want to make sure that these devices are getting the appropriate GPOs to make sure that they're compliant with our MBAM policies. And then we have a similar view over here on the right, where we're looking at the same data, but from a config manager BitLocker management perspective. So MBAM is going end of support, or it's in extended support right now. I think you have another 4 years or so before it goes fully out of support. And just the new way of managing BitLocker is with the CM BitLocker management. So we added support for that, and it's the same idea, right? You probably want to look at things that are unknown and make sure they're compliant with your config manager client policies, or look at things that are not managed by the site, right? These are maybe things that are still managed by MBAM. So we need to get those migrated over to CM BitLocker management so that we can fully shut off this MBAM server. So that's the BitLocker dashboards. Next, we're going to move on to some content tools. And content is kind of the precursor for any compliance with regards to application and software update deployment. So it's kind of useful to talk about. This is a newer dashboard that we shipped in the most recent release. And in the middle here, we can see a list of all the distribution points in our environment, along with what content is successful and what content is failed on those devices. And as I click on different parts of the chart, I can see the data kind of populate below. And in this chart, I'm probably more interested about the data that's failed, right? So if I click on the error, I can see at the bottom the content name, a bunch of information about that piece of content that's not on that distribution point for whatever reason. And I can actually take action on it. So if I right click on it, I can open up the content status for that piece of content to get more information about where this particular piece of content is distributed, right? Maybe if it's distributed successfully to some DPs, but not to this one, maybe it's just a problem with this DP. Helps me narrow down my scope of troubleshooting. Or I can just go ahead and redistribute, validate the content. Or if I'm done with this piece of content, I can remove it. We also have some information about the DP that I clicked on over here on the right. Some data about Pixie and multicast and HTTPS enabled. And then up here at the top is a really useful button for just go ahead and redistributing all failed content that's in this dashboard. So if I have a bunch of content that's failed, and I know that the content failed to distribute because it tried to do it while the DP was down or something, I just click this button and be reasonably confident that it's going to go through. So a nice little shortcut there as well. The last dashboard that we're going to walk through is our software update deployment status dashboard. And this is all about software update compliance in the environment. So up here at the top, I can limit by collection. I can limit to software update groups or deployed updates, and I get the same ideas as all the other charts, where I get two kind of pivots of the same information in the environment. Over here on the left, I have compliance rolled up at a device level. So I have whether the devices are compliant, non-compliant, or unknown. And over here on the right, I have compliance kind of rolled up into a category level. So, as I click through these different categories, I can see the different updates that are in that category, as well as drill in and see all of the devices that are missing those software updates. So if I'm an organization that really focuses on security updates, for example, I can just focus on those first, drill in and see, well, these two devices are missing this highly critical security update. I can right click on those and launch the install missing software updates tool. Whoops, that was the wrong button. Launch the install missing software updates tool to kick off those software updates on those devices. And then over here on the left, again, we have the same type of view, but from a device level. So as I click on the non-compliant devices, I get a list of all of the devices that are non-compliant with some of the updates that I've in my environment that I've deployed, all based on the settings that I've configured up here, right? So if I uncheck these boxes, some of these charts will change a bit, right? So I have compliant and non-compliant in these charts, and then it's the same idea. I can actually either drill in and look at all of the updates that this device is missing and get detailed information about all those updates. Or I can, at the top level here, I can right click and run, again, that's install missing software updates tool to try to install those updates on these devices and make them compliant. So, really useful set of tools. I can select them all, hit install, or I can drill in and get more information about the update. Right, so we see that soft reboot is pending. Maybe I just now by running a restart system action against those devices to make sure that they're compliant. And then after it's compliant, maybe I want to run the software update eval cycles or the state message cycles to speed up the reporting process and get them into this chart. And similarly with all the other charts, you can actually export this. So if you need to export this to your security compliance team for whatever reason, you can go ahead and do that as well. So that concludes the actionable reports part of the webinar. Now we're going to move on to kiosks. And we have kind of two sets of kiosk tools for configuring single-purpose devices in your environment under Kiosk Manager and under Unified Write Filter. And they both kind of work the same way in these profiles. And these profiles are just kind of bundles of settings that you configure to fit the needs of your organization. And so I'm going to come in here and go into Kiosk Manager, Manage Profiles. Our Manage Profiles window will pop up, and I'm just going to select a profile here and hit Next. And on this screen, we can see all of the different options that we have available for us to configure this particular profile. So I'm just going to go ahead and select them all so we can walk through it. This first screen is the automatic login screen, and this is pretty pretty straightforward. It's basically instead of when I reboot the device, instead of it going to the Control Alt Delete screen, it's going to just log in with the credentials that I've specified here. Right, and this can be a domain account, or it can be a local user account as well. And you can test the login here. The credentials themselves are actually stored in the LSA secure store on the device. They're not stored in the registries, so you don't have to worry about the credentials being exposed in clear text on the remote device. So yeah, pretty straightforward there. The next screen is the replace shell screen. And I think this is where a lot of the value lies inside a kiosk manager. This lets you replace the Windows desktop experience with a single application type of experience, or multiple applications if that's what you choose. And in this drop-down menu, you can see we have a couple of different options for applications. We have 4 web browsers, and then we have this Win32 app at the bottom that's more of a custom application thing. So I'm going to start with the web browsers real quick. So as I select Google Chrome here, we see on the right, we get a number of settings related to configuring this particular application. We can specify a launch URL. This is the URL that will open up automatically as the device boots up and Chrome is launched. We can specify a kiosk mode option, and this will basically turn the web browser into a full screen application. So you won't see any of the window decorations like the close and maximize, minimize button. You won't see the address bar at the top, so the users can't easily change this URL. Really useful feature, in particular for kiosk mode type of devices. We have a private mode option that lets, it's basically incognito mode for Chrome, private mode for Microsoft Edge and Internet Explorer. It prevents storage of local session cookies. So if as soon as the browser is closed, all of the session state is wiped out. And this is really about protecting your users from walking away from these public machines, so that as the browser is closed, you don't have to worry about someone else getting access to their Gmail or whatever you use these kiosks for. It's about protecting those credentials. We have a delay option that's available across all of the different application types. This is basically to make sure your network is provisioned before launching the application. It lets you configure an amount of time that that Windows will just kind of wait before launching into your app, so that it gives it time for the network to be fully configured and internet accessible and that kind of thing. It's not really necessary for like Chrome and Internet Explorer and Edge, because they're all network aware. They listen for changes on your local network. And will react accordingly. So for these, we have it set to a default of 0, but you can change that if it fits your needs. We have a window style option to control how the application is launched. Typically we see people launching it in either normal or maximized, but if you have a hidden app that you want to, track some information about the device, you can use that as well. And then close behavior. This controls what happens when either the user closes the app or the application itself crashes. So you can have it do nothing. You can have it try to relaunch the app, or just reboot the whole computer. If your app needs a specific startup sequence, that might be a valid option for you. The rest of these internet browsers have all the same settings, so I'm not going to go through those. But I'm going to add the Win32 app here, and this is for scenarios where you don't need a web browser. You need something specific to your organization to launch. With public schools in the United States here, we see it used for lockdown, a separate type of browser that we don't have. We don't have a profile for, called the lockdown browser. And this is a executable that gets installed on devices. You can browse for that executable and launch it. And it can be any executable you want, right? Like you could, if you wanted, you could launch a command prompt, for example. It doesn't really matter. I actually don't know where the command prompt is, so I'll ignore that. And you can specify any arguments that you want to too. So anything that you need to make sure that app launches in the way that you need it to, right? If, for example, if you're launching, that lockdown browser that I was talking about, maybe they have a kiosk mode switch, right? So maybe you would put a -K in there to launch the kiosk mode switch, and maybe you would put the URL that you want it to launch, for example. This is all application specific. It's all dependent on what you've configured to your profile to launch. And again, we get those same set of options down here at the bottom. And note here that I've actually added 2 applications. So when this launches, with this profile launches, it would pop up 2 different applications on the screen, and you can kind of control that by adding and removing those. The next screen is our restart on idle screen. This is for scenarios where if the user walks away from the screen, you just want it to reboot. This is about protecting the user from themselves. So if they've left their Gmail session open or their banking session open, maybe you just want to have that extra layer of protection for them. So don't leave it open for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is in your environment, whatever's reasonable there. And you can configure it to do only for that auto login user that we configured in the first screen, or you can do it for any user that logs into it if you're not using that auto login user. Similarly, you can delete files and folders on restarts. Again, this is about protecting the user as well as making sure that the device itself stays in a configured state, or a state that you want it configured in. So for example, you could delete the local temp folder of the auto login user, or the documents folder for that auto login user, or you can specify a custom path down here at the bottom as well. The internet URL allow list is about controlling which websites the user is able to visit. And down here we have a single profile for Pearson for K through 12 state testing here in the United States. But you could also add your own custom paths, right? So earlier I added that recast software URL. I probably want to add that in here as well. That way my users will be able to hit that when the web browser is launched. You can disable keyboard keys as well. So we typically say, well, maybe you want to disable the left and the right alt to prevent Control-Alt-Delete, or alt tabbing out of apps or something like that. But there's any other app or any other key that you can think of in this list. And then finally, we have audio configuration. So if you're doing like a state test, or maybe like a training lab, maybe you want this volume set very low, or if you have a public digital signage kiosk, you want to grab people's attention, maybe you want to bump that. So those are all the settings available inside of the Kiosk Manager profile. Once you have a profile, you can apply that profile to a device or a collection of devices by going into Kiosk Manager and hitting Apply Profile. And when this pops up, we're going to get a wizard that lets us select which profile we want to deploy, as well as and so we select it, we hit next, and then it'll let us decide if we want to deploy it right now. So if we deploy it immediately, this device would reboot, apply all the settings in the profile, right? Maybe auto login, and pop up to a single application. Right? Maybe we launch Google Chrome as a full screen browser there, or we can schedule deployment in the future. We often see this in the United States for state testing, right? The K through 12 state testing, where students are coming in and I want the computer lab ready for this particular test. I'm going to deploy it to I'm going to deploy a single application profile for this computer lab for the next 3 hours, and then roll it back to a full Windows desktop environment later. It's really useful for that type of scenario. Or if you have a generic computer training lab in your organization, this can be useful for that too. And finally, I mentioned that you can kind of go back and forth between these lockdown profiles and then the full Windows desktop experience. You can actually have the same set of scheduling options when you remove profiles. And when you remove a profile, you don't have to select which profile you chose before. It'll just remove all Kiosk Manager type of settings from the device, and you can either tell it to remove it immediately or schedule the removal for the future. Again, if you're wanting to switch back and forth on a schedule, this can be really useful for that. The next bit I want to show is kind of related to that, is our unified write filter settings. And unified write filter is a Windows 10 feature that actually it's an older Windows feature that was available in embedded SKUs. With Windows 10, they added the unified write filter to the embedded or excuse me, the enterprise and education SKUs. So what it does is it lets you kind of configure a known good state of a device and kind of lock it in for that device. So any new changes to the device will be written to a layer that gets wiped on reboot. And I'll kind of describe what I mean a little bit here. So as I select a profile here, I'm going to hit next. And here, we have the single screen in this wizard, but up here at the top we have a list of exclusions, and down here we have various caching options. The unified write filter, as I mentioned, kind of redirects all writes to a caching layer that's wiped on reboot. These cache options down here at the bottom kind of let you configure that caching layer, like the size of the caching layer, where that caching layer is stored, whether it's in memory or to disk. And so basically as these devices are running in this lockdown state, this caching layer is here configured for 2 gigabytes. So as you have up to 2 gigabytes of space of data to be written to disk before it'll stop accepting any changes to disk. And again, that layer gets wiped on reboot. So on the next reboot, this is set back to 0, and it's allowed to grow up to that 2 gigabyte mark again. And this is really useful for locking down things, but there are certain areas where you probably want to add exclusions. And we have a couple of profiles available for you up here at the top to configure exclusions for common products that we've seen in environments. And so, if I add config-man client here, we can see a whole bunch of exclusions added related to that config-man client, with regard to various files in the CCM folder, registry paths, things like that. And we have similar exclusions for Windows Defender and just generic Windows, right? It's important to add these Windows exclusions for, to make sure that, your time zone information is correct, and that your device is able to reset its group policy and that kind of thing, or reset its local password with the Active Directory. So all sorts of important exclusions here. And if there's areas that you want users to be able to write, right? Like maybe you really want users to write to the CMI files directory, for example. You can add that as an exclusion so that those files written there persist across reboots. So once I have my profile, I can apply that profile to a device or device collection. And when I apply this profile, I get the same set of scheduling options that I get with Kiosk Manager. And as I apply the profile to the device, I'm kind of locking it in to that single or to that configured state, so that no new changes to that device are going to be persisted on it. So one reboot away from getting it back to a known good configuration. So it can be incredibly powerful, in particular for your computer labs. And again, I mentioned scheduling, same such as scheduling options as Kiosk Manager. The really cool thing about Unified Write Filter is that your config manager clients are Unified Write Filter aware, which means that your deployments to Unified Write Filter enabled devices are going to behave in a more sane way than some of the other third-party lockdown type of platforms that are available. So the config man client will know if the device is locked down, and based on your deployment settings, will know to either reboot into that unlocked state automatically without you doing anything in the Unified Write Filter tools that we have, apply the changes that you've configured to apply, and then reboot back into that lockdown state again so that it's ready for your end users. So it's an incredibly powerful feature, and again, the client makes managing it that much easier. The last thing I want to point out, the Unified Write Filter itself is a Windows 10 feature that's not installed by default. So we do have this install Unified Write Filter feature here in the menu. This will not enable the write filter at all. This just gets the bits in place so that this apply Unified Write Filter profile will work. And then finally, we have the same kind of options for disabling, right? So you can disable the Unified Write Filter profiles that you've applied to those devices as well. The last bit I want to mention here too is this Unified Write Filter status. So if you want to see how devices are configured with regards to the unified rate filter, you can launch this tool, and it'll give you a view of whether or not the feature is enabled, if the filter is ready for the current or the next session. Current session meaning as the device sits today. Next session meaning the next reboot. So we can see here, this device doesn't have the unified rate filter feature enabled. I can go ahead and enable that if I want to from this menu as well. So that concludes the kiosk portion of the webinar. Next, I'm going to move on to our automation section, and really that revolves around RCT Builder and RCT Runner. And Builder is really about managing workflows in your environment and kind of chaining together some of the back-end recast actions that we have available to solve organization-specific problems. And over here on the right, we see all sorts of actions that back our right-click tools that you can use inside of your actions. And there's like 500 actions here. It's a ton of actions that are available for you to utilize. I'm just going to cover one common use case here in this fixed encryption method action. And the idea behind this particular action is that I've reimaged a bunch of devices with a task sequence, but in that task sequence, I've forgotten that the default BitLocker enable step is set to AES 128, and my security compliance team says that we must be at XTS 256. And so now I have a bunch of devices out in the environment that have the wrong encryption method, and now I'm tasked with fixing it. And because encryption method is a long, arduous process, we want this available for our help desk to help schedule this, make sure that we weren't doing any work that they were doing. And again, we didn't want to reimage the devices because that would again take too long for the user and be way too disruptive for the business. So we create this builder action, and we'll kind of walk through the steps here. The first step we do is stop the MBAM service, right? We don't want MBAM detect, hey, your device is decrypting. I'm just going to go ahead and re-encrypt it again, because the device has to be fully decrypted before we can re-encrypt it with the new encryption method. So we want to make sure we stop that MBAM, and then we start decrypting the C drive, right? And this could take a really long time, depending on the size of the disk, the speed, all of that. So we have this PowerShell script here that's going to sit here and wait for that to complete and notify us of progress as it decrypts. And then once this PowerShell script completes, that'll happen. The decryption actually finishes. We're going to set a registry value to override the encryption method on that device. We're going to set the value of encryption method with XTSOS to value 7 to make sure that we're getting the encryption method. Then we're going to add our key protectors. Just a normal prerequisite when encrypting a device, you have to add some sort of key protector to protect the BitLocker key from being exposed. And here we've added TPM and a numerical password. And then we're going to start the encryption process. And here we're not going to wait for it to finish, because we know once we kick it off, we're reasonably happy that it's going to go. And then we're going to send an email when we're done with the action, so that we know that this device has successfully started its re-encryption process. And the cool thing about this is that there's a lot of complexity here. There's a lot of really powerful actions built within this builder action. But when I make this builder action available to other service desk users or other IT admins in my organization, I don't need to give them access to any of the intermediate actions here. When I only need to give them access to this fixed encryption method builder action, and they'll be able to run the entire action with the inputs that I've specified here, but they will not be able to run the actions individually. So it's a really powerful way to kind of customize the permissions model inside of the right-click tools as well. And if I wanted to run that, I can right-click on a device or device collection, or misclicks, and open up RCT Runner. And that's going to give me a list of all of the actions that are available for me as a user. And again, this list of actions is trimmed by our permissions model and the right-click tools. I can choose my fix encryption method action, and I can either choose to run it immediately, right? If I have the user phone right now, I can walk them through, right? All right, we're going to kick off this decryption process, go walk away for a while, let it run. Or I can schedule it in the future. If the user is going to walk away from the desk at 3 p.m., I can set that up for 3 p.m. Their time to make sure that runs. So again, really, really powerful automation platform. We do have a bunch of these kind of pre-canned builder actions available on our docs site that are available for import. So take a look there. We'll probably post a link in the chat to make sure people have access to that. And that concludes the demo portion of the webinar. I'm going to hand it over to Scott, who's going to talk us through a couple of website things.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. A lot of great information. Thanks for showing that to us. Let me share my screen real quick. So each of you guys for coming to our webinar today are eligible for a free 7-day trial of Enterprise. So I will show you how to get that on our website, as well as some other useful resources you can find up there. And then we will announce the winner of the gift card and then send it over to Marty for Q&A. So for the 7-day trial of Enterprise, you can contact sales up here, or you can go to our contact page and contact us and just say you were part of the webinar and we can get a 7-day trial set up for you. If you did enjoy what you saw today about all the Enterprise features and you think they would be useful, you can request a quote. Or if you want more of a personalized demo to see some of the tools maybe we didn't talk about as much today, or how you can use these in your personalized environment, you can schedule an overview with us. If you request a quote either here or on our pricing page, after the quote, you will also get a prompt where you can optionally schedule a demo with us as well. So this is our website. We also have feature requests. This is where we get a lot of our tools and improvements going forward. So you can submit your own. You can see what other people have submitted, vote on ones you like or you don't like. We also have technical documentation, which was written by Marty. So you can see a lot of great tips, troubleshooting, whatever for right-click tools. And we also have a blog, which shows you how to do things, not only for right-click tools, but also for other tools in MemCM. The last thing I'll mention is Workplace Ninja is hosting a virtual event. I believe it starts next week. There's over 45 sessions, tons of interesting ones. Chris and Marty will both be speaking at a few of these sessions. So I strongly recommend to check it out. They have a lot of great information every year and a lot of important speakers. So yeah, going to the winner of the $100 gift card is Anthony. Congratulations, Anthony. Keep an eye on your email. We'll contact you after this, and then we can get the gift card all sorted out and emailed to you. But that's about it for me for now. So I will hand it over to Marty, and he can answer any of the questions you guys have.
Hey, Scott, thank you. Hey, everyone, my name is Marty. I am the Customer Success Manager here at Recast Software. So I have worked with a bunch of people, probably maybe some of you as well, in setting up your environment or answering questions that you might have about the right-click tools. And what I am here for now is to answer questions. If anybody came up with any questions that they thought of while they were watching the webinar, or anything that you've been wondering about right-click tools, we can hopefully answer that right now. We did have a question about, they noticed that the video was being recorded and we're wondering about a link for that. Yes, we are recording the video. There will be a link available for it. I believe also we have it, we usually have these on our YouTube channel a couple of days afterward that you can view as well.
Yeah, we'll also be sending out an email to everyone who attended with the recording so you can watch it again.
Excellent. Or you can send it to your, your boss or your best friend or your worst enemy or whatever. Have them watch as well. All right. So what you can do, if you have any questions, go ahead and click on that Q&A button, and then you can go ahead and post a question, and we will answer that for you, or I will. All right, maybe we'll just go another minute to see if anybody thinks of anything that they have a question about. All right, hearing no questions, I think I'll go ahead and pass it over back to Scott.
Yeah, well, I just want to say thanks, of course, to Chris and Marty. Marty, you got off easy today, but thank you for being here, and thank you for everyone to attend. It really means a lot to us to show that people are, willing and interested about right-click tools to come out and learn some more about the product. So keep an eye on your email where we'll send out the recording. You know how to find us at our website. You can also find us on Twitter at Recast Software. And we look forward to talking with all you guys and getting set up that free enterprise trial. Thanks for coming, everyone. Bye-bye.